The plasma bolt missed Jake Morrison's head by inches, scorching the metal wall behind him. He dropped to one knee, his breath coming in sharp bursts as 3 Krell warriors advanced through the smoke-filled corridor. Their scales gleamed under the emergency lights, and their weapons hummed with lethal energy. Jake had no gun, no armor, nothing but the combat knife strapped to his thigh and years of training the aliens knew nothing about. Commander Vexara watched from her position 30 feet away, her violet eyes tracking the human with cold amusement. She had studied Earth's military files during the invasion planning. Humans were weak, their bodies fragile compared to Krell physiology. This one carried no visible weapons of consequence. He would die like the others. The first Krell lunged forward, confident in his superior strength and reach. Jake's hand moved in a blur. The knife cleared its sheath and carved upward in one fluid motion, finding the gap between chest plates. The warrior's momentum carried him past Jake, already dying. The second Krell fired, but Jake was already moving, using the falling body as cover. He came up inside the alien's guard, the blade punching through the soft tissue beneath its jaw. Purple blood sprayed across the deck. Vexara's amusement vanished. She had never seen a human move like that. The third warrior hesitated, and that hesitation cost him everything. Jake closed the distance in 3 steps, his knife work precise and brutal. The Krell fell without landing a single hit. The corridor fell silent except for the alarm klaxons. Jake stood among the bodies, breathing hard, his knife dripping alien blood. He looked up at Vexara, and she saw something in his eyes that made her warrior's instinct flare with warning. This was not fear. This was not desperation. This was controlled violence, honed to perfection. She activated her personal shield and drew her plasma sword. If she wanted to understand what made this human dangerous, she would need to test him herself. She descended the stairs slowly, studying his stance, the way he held that primitive blade. Her tactical computer analyzed his movements from the previous fight, running probability matrices. The results made no sense. No human should move with that speed and efficiency. Jake watched her approach, his mind calculating angles and timing. He had fought Krell before. During the initial invasion of Earth, he knew their tactics, their overconfidence in technology and physical superiority. What they did not know was that humanity had been perfecting the art of blade combat for thousands of years. Every culture, every civilization, every war had taught humans new ways to kill with edged weapons. That knowledge lived in Jake's muscle memory. Vexara struck first, her plasma sword cutting through the air with a sound like tearing silk. Jake pivoted, the blade missing him by a hair's breadth. He countered immediately, his knife striking her shield in 3 rapid blows, testing its response time. The shield flickered but held. She attacked again, faster now, her warrior's pride engaged. Jake gave ground, but it was controlled, measured. He was learning her rhythm, her patterns. The knife in Jake's hand was not just a weapon. It was an extension of his will, his training, his species' long history of warfare. Every movement carried the weight of human evolution, the countless battles that had shaped his kind into survivors. Vexara began to understand, too late, that she had made a critical error in judgment. This human was not powerless. He was something far more dangerous. A predator who had learned to hide his fangs until the moment to strike. Their blades met again in a shower of sparks, and the real fight began. The shield around Vexara pulsed with each impact, its energy reserves draining faster than her tactical computer predicted. Jake Morrison's knife struck like a viper, always aiming for the shield's weakest points, the microsecond gaps in its coverage. She had fought thousands of battles across dozens of worlds, but never against an opponent who treated her advanced technology with such casual disregard. Jake feinted left, then rolled right, as her plasma sword carved through the space he had occupied. His knife found her thigh, the blade sliding between armor plates. The shield sparked and failed for a fraction of a second. Blood, deep purple and hot, ran down her leg. The wound was not deep, but the impossibility of it shook her confidence. Her armor was rated to withstand small arms fire. A primitive knife should not penetrate it. She snarled and pressed her attack, using her superior reach and strength. The plasma sword hummed as it swept toward his chest. Jake dropped beneath the arc, his blade coming up in a reverse grip. The knife found the joint in her armor at the elbow. Her sword arm went numb, fingers spasming. The plasma blade deactivated and clattered to the deck. Vexara stumbled backward, clutching her injured arm. Her tactical computer screamed warnings, suggesting retreat protocols. She ignored them. She had not risen to commander by fleeing from battles. She activated her wrist-mounted neural disruptor, a weapon designed to scramble nervous systems at close range. The device whined to life, its electromagnetic pulse radiating outward. Jake's vision blurred, his muscles seized, pain shooting through every nerve. He dropped to one knee, fighting to maintain consciousness. The knife nearly slipped from his grasp. Vexara advanced, drawing a sidearm with her good hand. She would finish this, then study his corpse to understand what made him different. Through the pain, Jake's training kicked in. His instructor's voice echoed in his mind from years ago. Pain is just information. You decide what to do with it. He forced his hand to move, forced his muscles to obey. The knife left his hand in a smooth, practiced throw. It spun twice before the tip buried itself in Vexara's wrist. Her gun discharged wildly, the plasma bolt punching through the ceiling. The weapon fell from her nerveless fingers. The neural disruptor deactivated as she clutched her wrist, and Jake's head cleared. He surged forward, tackling her to the ground. They grappled, her superior strength against his superior technique. She tried to crush his ribs, but he shifted his weight, used her own force against her. His elbow found her throat, pressing down with controlled pressure. Not enough to kill, but enough to make breathing difficult. Vexara's violet eyes widened as she realized she was losing. This could not be happening. She was Krell, bred for war across generations. He was human, a species they had classified as minimal threat. Yet here she was, pinned beneath him, her weapons scattered, her armor breached in multiple places. Jake could see the calculations running behind her eyes. He had seen that look before, on other Krell commanders. The moment they understood that humanity was not what their intelligence reports claimed, that moment of recognition that they had invaded the wrong planet, he increased the pressure on her throat just enough to make his point. She stopped struggling, her warrior's instinct finally overriding her pride. She had lost, and they both knew it. Jake pulled back slightly, keeping her pinned but allowing her to breathe. He retrieved his knife from her wrist, the blade slick with purple blood. She watched him with new eyes, reassessing everything she thought she knew about humans. The corridor was a mess of bodies and scorch marks. Alarms continued to wail throughout the ship. Jake knew more Krell would be coming soon. He needed to move, to find the other human prisoners and get them to the escape pods. But first, he needed information. He pressed the knife to the gap in her armor at her collar. Not cutting, just a promise of what could happen. Vexara had interrogated enough prisoners to know the position she was in. The tables had turned completely. She spoke, her voice strained from the pressure on her throat. The words came out in heavily accented English. You are not like the others we captured. Where did you learn to fight like this? Jake's expression remained cold. Every human knows how to fight. We have been doing it since we learned to stand upright. Your people made a mistake thinking our technology defined our capability. We were killers long before we reached the stars. Vexara absorbed this information, her tactical mind already racing through the implications. If this one human could defeat her and 3 warriors with nothing but a knife, what could a coordinated group of armed humans do? What had the Krell truly invaded? She had read the reports about human history, but they had seemed exaggerated, propaganda designed to make a weak species seem more dangerous. Wars spanning entire continents. Conflicts lasting decades. Weapons specifically designed to maximize suffering. She had dismissed it as typical species embellishment. Now, with a human's blade at her throat, those reports took on new meaning. Jake saw understanding dawn in her eyes. Good. Let her report back to her superiors. Let them know what they were facing. Humanity had been caught off guard by the invasion, their defenses overwhelmed in the initial assault. But humans adapted. They learned. They improvised. And they never, ever stopped fighting. He eased back, keeping the knife ready, but giving her space. She slowly sat up, cradling her injured arm. Her wounds were not fatal, but they would scar. She would carry the memory of this defeat for the rest of her life. A new sound echoed through the corridor, human voices speaking in urgent tones. Jake's backup had arrived. A squad of freed prisoners armed with captured Krell weapons rounded the corner. They took in the scene quickly, weapons trained on Vexara. Among them was Lieutenant Amy Chen, her face bruised, but her eyes sharp. She looked at Jake, then at the dead Krell warriors, then back to Jake. Her respect was evident. Jake stood, keeping himself between Vexara and the other humans. The Krell commander was no longer a threat, and he would not allow her execution. Information was more valuable than revenge. Amy seemed to understand. She lowered her weapon slightly, though she kept it ready. Jake addressed Vexara directly. You are going to help us reach the escape pods. You are going to clear our path through your ship, and you are going to send a message to your fleet. Tell them that humanity is not defeated. Tell them that every ship they send, every warrior they deploy, will face what you face today. Tell them we are not prey. Vexara stood slowly, her pride wounded, but her survival instincts stronger. She nodded once, a gesture of acknowledgement from one warrior to another. She had underestimated them, catastrophically. The question now was whether the rest of the Krell fleet would learn from her mistake before it was too late. The group moved through the ship, Vexara leading with Jake close behind. Every Krell they encountered saw their commander wounded, defeated, being used as a hostage. The psychological impact rippled through the crew. If a commander could fall to a human with a knife, what else had they gotten wrong about this species? The escape pods were 3 decks down. They had limited time before the ship's security protocols locked everything down. Jake kept his knife ready, his eyes scanning for threats. The blade had spoken its truth, and that truth was spreading through the Krell ship like wildfire. Humanity was not powerless. They never had been. The detention block's blast doors stood between Jake Morrison and freedom. Vexara pressed her bloodied hand against the scanner, her violet eyes flickering with something between anger and grudging respect. The massive doors groaned open, revealing 24 more human prisoners crammed into cells designed for half that number. Lieutenant Amy Chen moved forward, using a captured plasma cutter to slice through the force field generators. The prisoners emerged, blinking in the harsh light, their faces showing weeks of mistreatment and starvation. But Jake saw something else in their eyes, the unbroken spirit that had carried humanity through every dark chapter of its history. These people had survived the invasion, the capture, the imprisonment. They were not ready to give up. A man named Marcus Webb pushed his way forward. He had been a civilian engineer before the Krell came, just a regular person trying to live his life. Now his hands were scarred from forced labor, and his eyes held a hardness that came from watching friends die. He looked at Vexara, then at Jake's knife, still stained with purple blood. He understood what had happened without words. Jake handed out weapons taken from the dead Trell warriors. Not everyone knew how to use them, but desperation was a fast teacher. Amy organized them quickly, her military training cutting through the chaos. She split them into 3 groups, each with at least one person who had combat experience. The escape pods were close, but close meant nothing if they could not reach them alive. The ship's intercom crackled to life. A Krell voice, harsh and commanding, spoke in their clicking language. Vexara's expression tightened. She translated without being asked. The captain knows what happened. He has sealed off the escape pod bays. He would rather let you die than allow humans to escape and warn others about our weaknesses. Jake's jaw clenched. Of course they would. The Krell had based their entire invasion strategy on humanity being easy prey. If word got out that a single human with a knife had defeated a commander and her warriors, it would undermine their psychological warfare. Fear was as much a weapon as plasma rifles, and the Krell could not afford to lose it. Marcus spoke up, his voice rough from disuse. There is another way. I worked in the engine section for 3 weeks. I know the maintenance tunnels. They connect directly to the secondary hangar. It is where they keep the scout ships. Amy nodded. That could work. Scout ships have faster-than-light capability. We could reach the outer colonies before the main fleet. Vexara made a sound that might have been a laugh. The secondary hangar has a 4-digit security code that changes daily. You will never guess it in time. The ship's AI will flood the tunnels with poison gas if you try to force entry. Jake pressed the knife against her armor again, not threatening, but reminding. Then you will give us the code? She met his gaze. And why would I do that? You will kill me regardless once you have what you need. Jake shook his head. I do not kill prisoners. That is not who we are. You help us escape, and you live. You have my word. Vexara studied him for a long moment. She had been trained to detect deception, to read body language and vocal patterns. She found no lie in him. This human genuinely meant what he said. It was incomprehensible. Krell warriors would never show such mercy to a defeated enemy. Yet here was this human, offering her life in exchange for cooperation. She gave him the code. Jake did not know if it was real, but they had no choice except to trust her. The group moved out, following Marcus through the ship's maintenance passages. The tunnels were cramped and dark, designed for automated drones rather than living beings. They had to crawl single file, weapons catching on pipes and conduits. Halfway through, the tunnel junction ahead exploded in plasma fire. 2 Krell warriors had been waiting, their weapons cutting through the darkness. The lead human, a woman named Kelly Brooks, took the first shot to her chest. She died instantly, her body blocking the tunnel. The humans behind her returned fire, but the angle was wrong. They were trapped. Jake pushed forward, squeezing past the others. He could see the Krell warriors repositioning, preparing to pour fire down the tunnel. In seconds, everyone would be dead. He looked at Vexara, who was pressed against the tunnel wall beside him. She looked back, and something passed between them. A decision made without words. She shouted in her own language, commanding the warriors to cease fire. They hesitated, recognizing their commander's voice. That hesitation was all Jake needed. He launched himself forward, clearing the tunnel mouth in a diving roll. His knife was already moving before he hit the ground. The first warrior went down with the blade in his throat. The second raised his weapon, but Amy was right behind Jake, her captured rifle barking plasma fire. The warrior fell. The tunnel was clear, but Kelly's body remained behind. Another human lost to the Krell invasion. There was no time to mourn. The group pressed on, emerging finally into the secondary hangar. 3 scout ships sat in their berths, sleek and deadly. their systems humming on standby power. Marcus ran to the nearest one, his engineer's hands flying over the controls. He bypassed the security locks, rerouted power from the other ships, prepared the launch sequence. The others piled in, cramming into a space designed for 6 people. There were 18 humans left now, after Kelly's death, and 2 others who had not survived their imprisonment. Jake was the last to board. He turned back to Vexara, who stood at the hangar entrance. She had not tried to stop them, had not called for more guards. She simply watched, her wounded arm held close to her body. He spoke across the distance. "Tell your people what happened here. Tell them that humans do not surrender. Tell them that every ship they take, every colony they burn, only makes us more dangerous. We adapt. We survive, and we remember." Vexara inclined her head. "A warrior's salute," she would tell them. Whether they would listen was another question entirely. The scout ship's engines roared to life. Marcus piloted them through the atmospheric shield, out into the black of space. Behind them, the Krell battleship grew smaller. Ahead lay the jump point to faster-than-light travel, and beyond that, the outer colonies. They would warn them. They would prepare them. And humanity would learn from this encounter, just as they had learned from every war, every battle, every defeat throughout history. Jake cleaned his knife on a scrap of cloth, the purple blood finally coming away. The blade had spoken its truth to Vexara and her warriors. Now that truth would spread across the galaxy. Humanity was not powerless. They never had been. The Krell had simply mistaken technology for strength and weapons for will. It was a mistake that would cost them dearly. Amy sat beside him, exhausted but alive. She looked at the knife, then at Jake. "Where did you learn to fight like that?" He smiled grimly. "Earth. Before the invasion, I was just a Marine Corps instructor. I taught recruits basic combat. Nothing special, nothing the Krell would consider advanced. But that was the point. They studied our technology, our weapons, our ships. They never studied us. What makes us human? What makes us dangerous?" Marcus called from the cockpit. "Jump point in 30 seconds. Everyone hold on." The ship lurched as it entered faster than light travel. The stars stretched into lines, then vanished into the swirling chaos of hyperspace. They were free. They were alive. And they were bringing a message that would change the entire course of the war. On the Krell battleship, Vexara stood in the hangar, watching the empty space where the scout ship had been. Her arm throbbed. Her pride ached worse. She had been trained to believe Krell superiority was absolute. That belief lay shattered at her feet, along with the bodies of her warriors. She turned and walked toward the bridge, preparing her report. The captain would be furious. The Admiralty would demand explanations. But the truth was undeniable. They had underestimated humanity, and that mistake had just cost them their greatest advantage: the enemy's fear. The outer colonies of New Terra received the scout ship with a mixture of relief and alarm. Jake Morrison's reports spread through the Colonial Defense Network within hours. Admirals and generals studied his account, dissecting every detail of the encounter. The knife, bloodied and tested, was analyzed by military intelligence. They found nothing special about it, just standard carbon steel, the kind any human soldier might carry. That ordinariness was what made it terrifying to those who understood. Commander Helen Price stood in the war room, watching the holographic display of Krell fleet movements. She was a veteran of the initial invasion, one of the few flag officers who had escaped Earth's orbital defenses before they fell. She had spent months organizing the scattered remnants of humanity's military, preparing for a counteroffensive that seemed impossible. Jake's report changed everything. She called him in for a private debriefing, wanting to hear it directly from the source. He stood before her, still wearing the same blood-stained uniform, exhaustion evident in every line of his face. But his eyes remained sharp, focused. "Tell me exactly what happened," she said. "Do not summarize. Do not leave anything out. I need to understand how a Marine instructor with a knife defeated a Krell commander." Jake walked her through it, step by step. The initial plasma bolt, the 3 warriors, the precise movements that exploited gaps in Krell combat doctrine. He described Vexara's shield, how it responded to repeated impacts, the microsecond delays that could be exploited. He explained the neural disruptor, how he had fought through the pain by treating it as just another problem to solve. Commander Price listened without interruption. When he finished, she sat back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. "You said she seemed surprised by your capabilities, that she expected you to be weaker, slower." Jake nodded. "Their intelligence is flawed. They analyzed our technology and assumed that defined our combat capability. They missed centuries of human history, all the wars we fought before we ever left Earth. They do not understand that we are persistence hunters, that we evolved by outlasting and outsmarting prey that was bigger and stronger than us." Price pulled up files on her terminal. "Since your escape, we have been receiving scattered reports from other Krell ships, human prisoners fighting back using improvised weapons. Some have succeeded in taking control of entire sections. The Krell are responding by executing prisoners rather than risking more uprisings. They are afraid." Jake felt anger rise in his chest. "Then we need to move faster. Every day we wait, more humans die." Price stood and walked to the holographic display. She manipulated the controls, bringing up a tactical overview of the sector. "I am assembling a strike force. Small, fast ships, crewed by volunteers. The mission is simple. Hit Krell vessels, free prisoners, capture their ships when possible. You called it psychological warfare in your report. I am making it our official strategy. We are going to teach the Krell that every human they capture is a potential weapon." She turned to face him. "I want you to train others. Teach them what you taught those Marines. Not just knife work, but the mindset. The understanding that technology is a tool, not a crutch. That humans, at our most dangerous, are humans who refuse to quit." Jake accepted without hesitation. He spent the next 3 weeks in the training facilities of New Terra, working with volunteers from every colony. They ranged from former soldiers to civilians who had never held a weapon before the invasion. He taught them all the same lessons. Adapt to your enemy's weaknesses. Use their overconfidence against them. Never stop fighting until you cannot fight anymore. Among his students was a young woman named Lisa Grant. She had been a school teacher before the Krell came, specializing in ancient history. Now she practiced knife drills with the intensity of someone who had watched her entire world burn. She approached Jake after one session, her hands still trembling from adrenaline. "The things you are teaching us," she said. "This is not just about fighting the Krell. This is about remembering who we are, what we have always been." Jake cleaned his practice knife, the same one he had used aboard the Krell ship. "What do you mean?" Lisa gestured to the training hall, where dozens of humans practiced. "We built cities and spacecraft, and thought we had evolved beyond violence. But we did not evolve beyond it. We just channeled it differently. The Krell reminded us that the galaxy is not safe, that peace is something you have to fight for. You are teaching us to be dangerous again." Jake considered her words. Maybe that is what it takes. Maybe being dangerous is the only way to protect what matters. The Krell see weakness in mercy, in our reluctance to kill. But there is a difference between being peaceful and being harmless. We can choose peace, but we need to be capable of violence when peace fails. The training continued. Commander Price's strike force took shape, a fleet of captured Krell scout ships retrofitted with human modifications. They could not match the Krell in raw firepower, but they were learning to match them in ferocity and cunning. The first raids began in the 4th week after Jake's escape. Strike Team Alpha hit a Krell transport vessel carrying prisoners from the mining colonies. The operation was textbook: fast insertion, overwhelm the guards, free the prisoners, and disappear before reinforcements arrived. They lost 3 people, but they saved 42. More importantly, they captured the ship's data core, which contained fleet movements and tactical assessments. The intelligence was devastating in its implications. The Krell had classified humanity as a Class 3 threat, expected to be fully conquered within 6 standard cycles. Their projections assumed minimal resistance after the initial shock of invasion. The reports from commanders like Vexara, describing fierce resistance and unexpected capabilities, were being dismissed by the Admiralty as exaggerations or excuses for poor performance. Commander Price saw the opportunity. The Krell leadership was ignoring warnings from the front lines. That arrogance could be exploited. She authorized more raids, each one pushing deeper into Krell-controlled space. The strike teams were taking casualties, but they were also proving a point: humanity would not go quietly. Jake led Strike Team Delta on a mission to rescue prisoners from a research facility. The Krell had been experimenting on humans, trying to understand their biology, searching for weaknesses that could be exploited. The facility was lightly guarded because the Krell assumed the prisoners were too weak and malnourished to fight back. They were wrong. Jake and his team breached the facility at dawn, using stolen access codes provided by Krell defectors. Yes, defectors. Not all Krell supported the invasion. Some had studied human history and culture more thoroughly than their commanders. They understood what humanity was capable of when pushed to the edge. These dissidents secretly aided the resistance, providing intelligence and resources. The prisoners in the research facility were in bad shape, but they could still fight. Jake armed them with weapons taken from the guards. Together, they turned the facility into a fortress, holding off 3 waves of Krell reinforcements, while Commander Price's fleet moved into position for extraction. During the fighting, Jake found himself face-to-face with another Krell commander. This one was younger than Vexara, his scales bright with youth and inexperience. He charged at Jake with the confidence of someone who had never lost a fight. Jake sidestepped, his knife finding the gaps in the armor with practiced precision. The commander went down, not dead, but defeated. Jake left him alive, just as he had left Vexara alive. Let them live. Let them report back. Let them spread the word about what humans could do. The extraction was messy, but successful. They got everyone out, including the research data the Krell had compiled. Human scientists would later use that data to develop countermeasures against Krell biotechnology, turning the enemy's own research against them. Back on New Terra, Jake stood on the observation deck, looking out at the fleet assembling in orbit. More ships every day, crewed by humans who refused to accept defeat. The Krell had expected an easy conquest. Instead, they had awakened something primal in humanity, a survival instinct honed by millions of years of evolution. Amy Chen joined him at the window. She had been promoted to captain, leading her own strike team now. She stood beside Jake in comfortable silence for a moment before speaking. "Do you think we can win this war?" Jake thought about Vexara, about the recognition in her eyes when she understood what humans truly were. He thought about every prisoner they had freed, every small victory they had claimed. Yes, not because we are stronger or have better technology, but because we do not know how to quit. The Krell will eventually realize they invaded the wrong species. By then, it will be too late for them. The knife at his side had spoken its truth to one Krell commander. Now that truth was echoing across the galaxy, carried by every human who refused to surrender. The war was far from over, but the tide was beginning to turn. Humanity had remembered what it meant to be dangerous, and the Krell were learning the cost of that lesson. The final confrontation came 3 months after Jake Morrison's escape from the Krell ship. Intelligence reports indicated that Vexara had been recalled to the flagship, the Sovereign Blade, to face a tribunal for her failure. The Krell Admiralty wanted answers for why their invasion had stalled, why human resistance was intensifying rather than collapsing. Commander Price saw an opportunity that could not be ignored. The plan was audacious to the point of insanity. Strike Force Omega, composed of humanity's best soldiers and pilots, would infiltrate the Sovereign Blade during the tribunal. Their objectives were simple but brutal: rescue Vexara, capture the ship's command crew, and broadcast the truth about human capabilities across every Krell communication channel. It was psychological warfare on the grandest scale, designed to shatter Krell morale completely. Jake volunteered immediately. Amy protested, arguing that he had done enough, that he had earned the right to step back. But Jake knew better. This was not about earning anything. This was about finishing what he started in that corridor when he first locked eyes with Vexara. She had learned the truth. Now the entire Krell fleet needed to learn it too. The infiltration team consisted of 20 humans, each one a veteran of multiple raids. They used a captured Krell transport, its identification codes provided by defectors. The Sovereign Blade was massive, nearly 3 miles long, bristling with weapons and shielding. It was the pride of the Krell fleet, commanded by Admiral Thexram himself, the architect of the invasion strategy. They docked without incident. The Krell crew barely glanced at them, assuming they were just another supply transport. Jake led the team through the ship's corridors, following schematics provided by intelligence. The tribunal was taking place in the main assembly hall, a vast chamber designed to hold thousands of Krell warriors. They reached an observation gallery overlooking the hall. Below, Vexara stood in the center of a circular platform, surrounded by her peers and superiors. Her armor had been stripped away, replaced with simple cloth. Her wounds from their fight had healed, but Jake could see she carried herself differently now. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a weary resignation. Admiral Thexarin stood above her on a raised dais. He was enormous, even by Krell standards, his scales dark with age and countless battles. His voice boomed through the chamber, accusing Vexara of cowardice, incompetence, and bringing shame to her bloodline. She had allowed a single human to defeat her. She had failed to kill prisoners who should have been helpless. She had enabled an escape that had emboldened human resistance across multiple sectors. Vexara's response was quiet but clear. The humans are not what we believed them to be. Our intelligence underestimated their capability for violence, their refusal to accept defeat. I fought one of their warriors with every advantage, and I lost, not because I was weak, but because he was stronger than we predicted. The chamber erupted in angry clicking and hissing. Krell warriors did not accept such excuses. Thexman declared her unfit for command and sentenced her to execution by neural disruption, a slow and agonizing death. Guards moved forward to carry out the sentence. Jake gave the signal. Strike Force Omega dropped from the observation gallery, using grappling cables and shock grenades. The chamber descended into chaos. Plasma fire lit up the darkness. Krell warriors scrambled for weapons. Humans moved with practiced efficiency, targeting the command structure first. 3 seconds after they dropped, 5 Krell commanders were dead or dying. Jake hit the platform running. He reached Vexara before the guards could react. She looked at him with wide eyes, shocked by his appearance. He cut her restraints with his knife, the same blade that had spoken truth to her months before. "No one deserves to die for telling the truth," he said. She stared at him for a moment, then nodded. She understood the larger game being played. This was not just a rescue. This was a statement. Admiral Thexron roared commands, trying to restore order. Krell warriors poured into the chamber from every entrance. But Jake's team had prepared for this. They had rigged the chamber's power systems with explosives, Not enough to destroy the ship, but enough to create catastrophic failures in the lighting and shielding systems. Darkness fell, and in that darkness, humans thrived. The Krell had superior night vision, but they fought with tactics designed for overwhelming force and technological superiority. Humans fought with tactics honed in caves and trenches and urban warfare, places where technology mattered less than adaptability. Jake moved through the chaos like a ghost, his knife finding targets with terrible precision. Around him, his team did the same. They were outnumbered 50-1, but they were winning. Vexara fought beside them. She had no weapons except her natural strength, but she used it well. She broke necks, shattered knees, disabled warriors who had once served under her command. She had made her choice. Whatever consequences came from it, she would face them as a warrior, not a prisoner. The fight lasted 12 minutes. When emergency lighting finally restored, 30 Krell warriors lay dead or wounded. Admiral Thexron was pinned beneath a collapsed support beam, his leg crushed. The human team had suffered casualties too, 5 dead, 8 wounded. But they had achieved their objective. The command crew was captured, the chamber was secured, and Amy was at the communications console, preparing to broadcast. Jake stood over Thexron, his knife pressed to the Admiral's throat. The same knife, still doing its work, still speaking truth. You made a mistake when you invaded Earth. You studied our technology and thought you knew us. But you never studied our history. You never understood what we are. Thexron glared at him with pure hatred. You are primitives who got lucky. Your resistance means nothing. The fleet will crush you. Jake pressed the knife harder, drawing blood. Your fleet is already failing. Your warriors are reporting back about human capabilities, and you are executing them for telling the truth. You built your invasion strategy on lies and arrogance. That foundation is crumbling. Amy called from the console. We are live! Every Krell ship in this sector is receiving the broadcast. Jake looked up at the cameras that Amy had activated. He spoke clearly, knowing that thousands of Krell warriors were watching. My name is Jake Morrison. I am a human soldier. 3 months ago, I defeated Commander Vexara in single combat using nothing but this knife. Since then, humans have raided dozens of your ships, freed hundreds of prisoners, and killed thousands of your warriors. You classified us as a Class 3 threat. You were wrong. He gestured to the captured command crew, to the dead warriors scattered throughout the chamber. Look at this. Look at what 20 humans did to your flagship, to your best warriors, to your admiral. We are not prey. We are predators who learned to build cities. We are survivors who mastered space travel. We are a species that has fought wars for thousands of years before we ever met you. Vexara stepped forward into the camera's view. She spoke in her own language, knowing the Krell fleet would understand. I told you they were dangerous. I told you we underestimated them. You called me a coward for speaking truth. Now you see the cost of your pride. Jake continued. This war ends now. Not because you have won, but because you understand you cannot win. You can destroy our colonies, burn our cities, kill millions of us, but you cannot break us. For every human you kill, 10 more will take up arms. For every ship you destroy, we will capture 2 more. We will never surrender. We will never stop fighting. That is what humans do. That is what we have always done. He removed the knife from Thexron's throat and held it up to the camera. This blade is nothing special. Just carbon steel, the same metal humans have used to make weapons for thousands of years. But in the right hands, with the right training, with the right will behind it, this blade defeated your advanced technology. That should terrify you. Because if one human with one knife can do this much damage, imagine what millions of humans with millions of knives can do. The broadcast ended. Amy downloaded the ship's tactical databases while Jake organized the retreat. They rigged the Sovereign Blade's engines to overload, giving themselves 30 minutes to reach their transport. Vexara came with them, her fate now tied to humanity's. She had chosen sides, burned her bridges, and embraced the consequences. The explosion that followed could be seen from 3 star systems away. The Sovereign Blade, pride of the Krell fleet, broke apart in a fireball that lit up the void. Admiral Thexfrin died with his ship, along with the last vestiges of Krell confidence in their invasion strategy. The war continued for another 2 years, but the tide had turned permanently. The Krell could not maintain their offensive in the face of constant human resistance. Their warriors began to refuse assignments to human-occupied sectors. Their commanders started falsifying reports rather than admit defeats. The Admiralty fractured into factions, arguing over whether to continue the invasion or withdraw and cut their losses. Eventually, they withdrew. Not because they were defeated in conventional military terms, but because the cost of fighting humanity had become unbearable. The psychological damage was irreparable. The Krell had built their empire on the principle that superior technology guaranteed victory. Humans had proven that principle false. Jake Morrison stood on Earth, watching the last Krell ship leave orbit. The planet was scarred, billions dead, entire cities reduced to rubble. But humanity had survived. They had proven themselves to a galaxy that thought them weak. They had carved their place among the stars with blood and determination, and an absolute refusal to quit. Commander Price approached him, now bearing the rank of Admiral. She had led humanity through its darkest hours and emerged as one of its greatest heroes. She looked at Jake with respect that went beyond rank. You started something when you fought Vexara. You showed us what we could be when we stopped apologizing for our nature. Jake still carried the knife, though it had been cleaned and sharpened countless times. He looked at it, remembering that first fight in the corridor, the moment when blade met shield and everything changed. I just did what humans have always done. I survived. I fought back. I refused to be a victim. Vexara lived among humans now, studying their history and culture in depth. She had become a bridge between species, helping negotiate the treaties that would govern human-Krell relations for centuries to come. She never forgot the lesson Jake taught her, and she dedicated her life to ensuring other species learned it without needing to invade Earth first. Years later, when asked about the war, Jake would always say the same thing. We did not win because we were better. We won because we were willing to do whatever it took to survive. The Krell saw that willingness in a knife blade, and it terrified them. Sometimes the most powerful weapon is not the one with the most technology. Sometimes it is just the will to use what you have, no matter what it is, until you succeed or die trying. The knife that had spoken truth to Commander Vexara became a symbol displayed in the memorial hall dedicated to the invasion. Millions of people visited it every year, looking at the simple blade and remembering what it represented. Human resilience, human adaptability, human refusal to accept defeat. It was not a fancy weapon. It was not advanced technology. It was just a tool, wielded by someone who understood that true power comes from within, from the determination to keep fighting when everything says you should quit. That was the lesson that saved humanity. That was the truth that echoed across the galaxy. That was the message carried by a knife blade in the hands of a soldier who seemed powerless until the moment he needed to be anything but.